Have you ever judged someone just by the way they looked? Imagine laughing at a man's muddy boots and torn shirt, only to later find out he owns more wealth than everyone in the room combined. This is the story of a humble farmer who walked into the city, mocked for his simple clothes, until one shocking revelation silenced everyone. Stay until the end, because the lesson hidden here is one you'll never forget. Samuel Hayes had always been a man of the land, a farmer whose days began before the sunrise and ended long after the sky had turned black. His clothes reflected that life: a faded shirt patched in several places, trousers worn thin at the knees, and boots caked with years of soil and toil. To Samuel, these clothes weren't a shame, they were a badge of honesty, proof of a life spent building something real with his own hands. But the city did not see it that way. The city saw mud, wrinkles, and old fabric. And to the city, that meant a man without worth. On that particular morning, Samuel left his farm behind and rode into the heart of town. He wasn't there to impress anyone, he had a personal mission. His late wife, Margaret, had always wanted to see him in a fine suit, something elegant that matched the dignity she always saw in him. He had never indulged the thought, too busy plowing, planting, and tending to his people's needs. But now, with an important community gathering approaching in her honor, Samuel decided it was time. He wanted to honor her memory, and perhaps show the younger farmers that even men of the soil could walk with quiet pride. As he stepped into the bustling market square, his presence turned heads. Not because people admired him, but because they didn't. A group of young men lounging by a polished carriage noticed him immediately. One of them smirked and nudged the other. "Look at him," he scoffed, loud enough for passers-by to hear. "Did the scarecrow come to town for a holiday?" The others laughed, pointing at his dirt-streaked boots. Another added cruelly, "Maybe he came to sell a chicken or beg for scraps." Their laughter was sharp, designed to sting, but Samuel didn't falter. He kept walking, each step calm, each breath steady. He had long ago learned that the world often mocked what it did not understand. He pushed open the door to the tailor's shop, the bell above jingling against polished wood. Inside, the air was cool, scented with lavender oils and pressed linen. Suits hung neatly along the walls, their fabrics shimmering under golden lamplight. Behind the counter, a young assistant looked up. At first, his face showed polite curiosity. Then his eyes scanned Samuel's clothes, and his expression soured. "Can I help you?" he asked, his tone sharp and clipped. "Yes," Samuel said gently, "I'd like to see your best suits." The assistant stifled a laugh. "Sir, our best pieces start at more than you could earn in a year. Perhaps you'd prefer the clearance rack." He pointed lazily toward a dim corner where old, outdated coats hung neglected. Two wealthy men, already being measured for silk vests nearby, chuckled openly at the exchange. One leaned over to the other and whispered, "Imagine him in velvet, it would be like dressing a donkey in a crown." Their laughter rang out, filling the shop. Samuel's eyes flickered briefly, but he said nothing. His heart was steady, his pride unshaken. He had been underestimated his entire life. What they could not know was that the soil on his boots was richer than their entire fortunes combined. With quiet dignity, he thanked the assistant and turned toward the door. The laughter followed him back into the street, cruel and echoing. To them, he was only a poor farmer. What they didn't realize was that he was the richest man in the country, and their mockery had just planted the seeds of a lesson they would never forget. Later that week, the city transformed itself for one of its most prestigious events, a grand banquet at City Hall. Crystal chandeliers dangled from gilded ceilings, their light bouncing across polished marble floors. Servants hurried back and forth with trays of fine wine, and the air buzzed with the hum of conversation. Businessmen, landowners, and politicians filled the hall, each eager to rub shoulders with the man who had been announced as the wealthiest in the country. None of them knew his name or face. Rumors painted him as a magnate draped in jewels, a man with a booming voice and an army of servants at his side. Everyone expected someone larger than life, the very image of wealth itself. When the doors swung open and Samuel Hayes walked in, the entire hall went silent. Dressed in a perfectly tailored black suit, a crisp white shirt, and polished boots, he was nearly unrecognizable from the man in the market days before. His hair, usually messy from wind and sweat, was neatly combed. His back, once stooped from years of toil, now seemed straight and strong. And yet, his eyes were the same, steady, humble, with a quiet kind of strength. At his side stood the mayor himself, grinning proudly as he guided Samuel toward the center of the room. "Ladies and gentlemen," the mayor announced, his voice echoing, "I present to you Mr. Samuel Hayes, the largest landowner and the wealthiest man in our nation." Gasps erupted across the hall. Whispers buzzed like startled bees. The two wealthy men who had laughed at him in the tailor's shop exchanged horrified glances, their wine glasses trembling in their hands. The young assistant from the same shop, now serving as part of the catering staff, nearly dropped a tray when recognition hit him. The very man they had mocked, dismissed, and belittled now stood before them as someone whose wealth and influence far surpassed their imaginations. Samuel stepped forward, his calm presence commanding silence. He did not gloat, nor did he let arrogance color his tone. Instead, his voice was low but firm, each word landing heavy in the still air. "Not long ago, I walked your streets in the clothes of my trade. Boots covered in mud, a shirt worn by work, hands marked by soil. For that, I was mocked. For that, I was treated as less." He paused, his gaze sweeping the room. "But those same clothes are the reason this city eats. They are the clothes of a man who has tilled the soil, planted the seeds, and harvested the crops that feed families across this land." The silence in the hall deepened. Some shifted uncomfortably, others bowed their heads. "You judged me by the fabric on my back," Samuel continued, "not by the heart in my chest, nor by the labor of my hands. Wealth does not always glitter. Sometimes it is silent, sometimes it is humble, and sometimes it is found in the very mud you look down upon." A slow wave of applause began at the far end of the room, spreading until the entire hall erupted in thunderous claps. But Samuel didn't smile smugly. He simply bowed his head slightly, then moved to his seat, dignity intact, leaving behind a silence more powerful than any riches on display. That night, no one forgot the lesson. Respect is not measured by appearance, nor by what the eyes can see. True worth lies deeper, in character, in work, and in humility.